Hey folks, welcome back to the DarkHorse Podcast Livestream 108 Q&A section. It is still the 8 o'clock class, but it's the 9 o'clock hour of the 8 o'clock class.
9:45.
Well, yes, but the intention was to start, and then we ran into tech phenomena. But we are here now, ready to answer.
We are here. We're going to do a 45-minute Q&A today, so let's get to it. We've got two Discord questions this week that were a tie. They're both terrific.
We need an odd number of people voting.
Indeed. But I think that we can actually, I'd like to read both of them, and maybe let me just read them.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do actually have a lot of questions that came in on the other channel as well. First one, I am a school board member at my son's school and have been trying to start a discussion about the indoor requirement of masks on children. The rest of the board would like me to present information as to why mask mandates for kids should be dropped. Having previously had state and federal training for hazmat and bioweapons emergency response, I plan on bringing up improper mask care, fit, micron sizes, along with the mortality rate for young children. Do you have any additional information that could help strengthen my position in my upcoming school board meeting? I guess the improper mask care, fit, micron sizes, mortality rate for young children, all true and good. One obvious thing that I would add is that we are absolutely 100% affecting these children's development and ability to recognize, interpret, make sense of, and indeed learn how to convey meaning with their facial expressions, which is utterly important to learning how to be a human being. That this is affecting social and therefore psychological and therefore mental development. And at a critical age, and especially given that many in a place where there's mask mandates on school children, presumably other things are also still curtailed. So school is so much of where kids are getting a lot of their social interactions, and not being able to see each other is going to have long-term effects down the road. And no, it may not be trackable to this because it's one of these dispersed long-term effects.
Yeah, I would say that this really is the answer. That we are in exactly the wrong position trying to argue that they don't work, because then if they worked a tiny bit, which they probably do, right, then there's an argument. But the point is actually, no, it's not worth it. This isn't that kids masked for a month, right, to get us through whatever it was. We're now talking about years of development in which one of the most unique features of human beings, our facial expressions and our ability to convey things with them, are being denied them during a developmentally critical period. And so at some level, the answer is, even there is precious little evidence that kids are a strong contributor epidemiologically, that they are transmitting lots of disease. But even if they were transmitting lots of disease, or a certain amount of disease, and even though that does imply that some old and infirm people are likely to succumb to a disease that will ultimately have passed through a child somewhere, children are entitled to that which they need, right? We consider it child abuse to deny a child access to the world, to leave a child locked in a room. This is something like that. This is denying them something fundamentally human, and it's not temporary. That's the point. When does this end? They will not tell us. So this is not based on science, and the harm is quite obvious. And frankly, it's time for us to stand up for children, both with respect to vaccines that do not serve them medically, that the best argument for them is that it protects others, but we don't sacrifice children to protect others. That's not who we are, right? And this is that same theme, right? They are entitled to a proper developmental environment, and this isn't a temporary disruption of it, so it's enough already.
I will just add, I don't have time to pull it up now, but I'm remembering a graphic showing the number and intricacy of facial muscles in, I think, maybe a rhesus macaque, some old world monkey to which we are somewhat distantly related, more closely related than we are to a cedar tree, less so than to an orangutan. And the facial muscles, their number and intricacy in a human. And when you say, Bret, that facial expressions is a big part of how it is that we communicate, this is actually one of the things that makes us distinctly human. there are of course many things, and there's been much ink spilled over what is the one thing that makes us human, and down that road nothing really interesting happens because it's not one thing. But the fact that we can communicate so much more with our faces than even our closest relatives can also tells you something about how much we use that and how much we need it. Okay, second Discord question for the week is, given that the supplements companies are just as susceptible to all the same perverse market incentives as the big pharma corporations, and with less stringent FDA regulations to begin with, can you talk through how you decide which supplement company gets your money and the privilege of getting their products, like vitamin D, into the bodies of your family members? No need to give us your preferred brands if you don't want to, just very curious about your thought process of who to trust. It's an amazing question, and I don't have a very good answer except two things. It's not a good answer. I have two things that I can say. One is that you're absolutely right that there's actually less accountability for supplements than there is for things that the FDA has some agency over. There are, as a result of that, I think, for a number of supplements, there are molecular forms that are not actually useful to humans, are not bioavailable to humans. And in a industry in which there is basically very little accountability, you will of course find, if those forms that are not actually useful or indeed possibly even toxic to humans are cheaper to produce, then you will find those in bottles in a way that are very hard to tell the difference. And in general, they are required. In general, you will find that the actual molecular form of whatever it is on the ingredient list. And so I'm not remembering any of the details right now, but doing some thinking, doing some research into, if I'm taking C, for instance, vitamin C, what is the form which those researchers / doctors who have thought the most about vitamin C and its effects on the body and how much we need and how useful it is, what is the form that they say you should be taking it in, and how do I know that I'm getting that form? One, so that's like just a molecular form. And then imperfect for sure, but to some degree consumer reports is at least a good first pass. Like I'll go to them and know that often I won't find anything, and sometimes I'll find something, and you still have to think it through, but they're a decent first pass.
Yeah, I think this is a tremendous problem.
Yes,
the room for people to, and the obvious perverse incentive is it's harder and more expensive to do stuff right, and if nobody's checking, then creating a substitute for a nutrient, right, that superficially the consumer has no way of knowing is not functional, is a good way to make a profit or to increase your profit. So it is a problem.
Indeed.
In addition to that, I would say I have the added problem of there can't be any goddamn wheat hiding in it anywhere, right? And sometimes there is, and you can't tell because it will say, vegetable gelatin.
Right.
Well, vegetable isn't a meaningful term.
Yeah.
Is the vegetable in question wheat?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me as
vegetable is a stand-in for plant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The problem is, for me, it's not gluten. So even certified gluten-free doesn't nail down whether or not I'm going to react to it, because it's actually something about wheat. I've figured this out because certain gluten certifiably gluten-free things that have wheat in them still trigger me. So anyway, I'm constantly scrutinizing labels and seeing if I can figure it out, which leaves me preferring animal gelatin, which frankly I don't really want to be eating either, but there's not a good reason not to, and it isn't wheat. So
yeah, that does actually constrain the choices that we make as a family, and maybe figuring out what legitimate constraints you have and then using that to help decide between companies. But we have not found a brand which makes supplements that we trust. Would be very interested to hear if such a thing existed, and if so, why it is that you find them trustworthy.
Yeah. Now I also am dubious about standards like organic, which have obviously been gamed to a certain extent,
Yep.
and GMO free. But I would say that if somebody is meeting a standard like this, the chances that they're cheating elsewhere are probably lower, because as long as they're going to be making a somewhat more expensive product in order to meet the standard, they're really appealing to a customer that is actually looking for something other than just the label says it's D.
Right. I guess one more thing is, we've talked about this before. Neither of us ever took supplements at all. The only time that I ever took supplements before the pandemic here was when I was doing long field seasons in Madagascar and eating mostly rice and occasional reconstituted broth from dried fish. So I felt that there was some chance that I was going to become deficient in some stuff. And so I took a multivitamin, which I hated doing because you don't know what's in them. And also, what is limiting for you is very likely to be different from what is limiting for someone else. So in general, I would say generic multivitamins, even though have shelves and shelves of these things, are like, this is for women, this is for young boys. Like, I don't even know, I don't spend any time in these aisles, but I know that they're now marketing towards different demographics. But no, figure out what it is that you specifically, as we've talked about here, we are now supplementing with D and with C and with zinc and with quercetin and with magnesium, and we take all of those as individual pills, which is a pain. But it means that we take in the amount that we think we need to take, as opposed to someone else's version of that. And you had one more.
Yeah, I had one more thing, which is I do read a lot of reviews, because sometimes you will find out
on Amazon, just like that.
Yeah, wherever they happen to be.
Yeah.
You can't always know. If you see a bunch of good reviews, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but you will often see people flag stuff. If somebody has an allergy and it says gluten-free, but they were triggered, oftentimes you'll see that. Now, of course, there's plenty of room for people to sabotage each other's reviews, and we don't know how much of what we see is that.
And it's going to be very hard to get back to, the reason you're taking it in the first place is you're trying to get the product, and it's going to be very hard for individuals reviewing a product to know, did that magnesium pill contain magnesium in the amount that they said it did? Was it pure? Did it have other stuff in it? Very hard to know.
Yeah, it is.
So, did it trigger the allergy I know myself to have? That, that's a relatively easy thing. So that reviews works for, the person like you, who is presumably pretty rare, but, not as rare as we think, who has an acute and recognizable allergy to a particular ingredient that shows up in a lot of places.
Yep.
But it doesn't work, I don't think. It will not be very effective to deal with the question of how do you know you're getting what you think you're getting?
Yep.
All right. First question from the DarkHorseSubmissions.com. I remember watching an interview with an anthropologist some years ago who referred to cars as an exoskeleton. Can we consider our technological advances as evolutionary trade-offs? Are we becoming less human or evolved humans? I feel like that's three very different questions.
I think the thing is there's clearly a level at which you're doing something that is far outside of the kinds of things that evolution anticipated you would do.
Sure.
Right? There's a difference between, flying through, the air at 500 miles an hour and a flint-knapped stone tool for cleaning a hide, right? Mm-hmm. But, it's a little bit like the difference between vocal communication in animals and language. Right? There are distinctions we can draw, but at some level, what you have is a variation on a theme in which something is so extreme that it is fundamentally different. And I don't exactly know where to draw that line, but yeah, we are outside of the anticipated, and I think you and I in our book point to the right thing, which is there is the maximum rate at which our evolutionary toolkit for addressing change can keep pace, and anything above that is going to cause you to be sick. And if you're a little bit above it, you'll be a little bit sick. And if you're way above it, then you will constantly have new maladies, and people are going to have to use wires with tension to move your teeth around, and they're going to have to take silica and melt it down and shape it just so, and put it in front of both eyes so you can see where you're going. And
that's crazy talk.
It could happen. So anyway, the point is,
I just can't see it.
No, you can't. But pathology after pathology is the result of the fact that we keep solving problems and not, I mean, basically, here's the thing. Humanity, even you conservatives out there, humanity is liberal and progressive, and it is obsessed with solving problems, and it does not appreciate the full extent of the unintended consequences of all of those solutions, and we are living downstream of all of them, and it's messing with every feature of our lives. It's not to say we didn't get a lot out of it. Hey, we're living longer. That's cool, right? We don't die young. We don't get gangrene very frequently, but the price has been astronomical and too high.
I'm not. You said humanity is liberal and progressive, but humanity is also traditional and conservative. I would say it's both. I think I know where you're going with this, but obviously, I mean, part of the point of our book and of how we've lived for decades now is you take what has worked in the past and is still working, and you fight hard to keep it. And you also look towards what has yet to be imagined, and you embrace the new without compromising the old.
Yeah, I'm not.
Has been functional and is still working.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying we all. Maybe the point is we mature. Boy, the conservatives are going to love this.
I know.
We mature into a kind of restraint over problem solving, because once you upend enough shit by creating a solution that's worse than the problem, right, you begin to learn, hey, maybe I ought to think carefully about whether or not to deploy a solution. But we all, as individuals, find that little thing that annoys us, and we think, wouldn't it be great to have a
fix that?
Right. We just and so anyway,
I've got a fix for map apps in cars that I've been talking about for years.
It's why is it not out there? You know what? Put it into the world and let's see if we can get some of those programmers or the AIs, whatever it is that writes programs these days.
Super simple. Okay. If you live in a place where you drive from your home a lot, you go places, you live in a city that has lots of nooks and crannies, and so you tend to put on the map app when you go. Unless there is one, well, even if there is one and only one, but very often there will be many ways that you can get from where you're going to the sort of the inner circle, at which point you will need the map application after that, but you don't need it for the first eighth of a mile, quarter mile, 1 mile, 5 miles, whatever it is. It depends on the environment you're living in. And yet, if you are not to be fiddling with the application as you're driving, you set it as you go, and then I can't stand the sound, so I never have the sound on. But it's also just informing you of what turns to make, even if you have a preferred way to get out of your immediate neighborhood. There should be a way within the apps to say, okay, I'm starting here, I'm starting at A, I'm going to B, but don't inform me of how to get to B until I get to C, which granted that's the wrong order, but I'm going from A to B through C. And thank you very much. You don't have to tell me anything about what to do until I get to C, at which point please kick in and start informing me.
Yeah, or don't bug me till I say, hey Siri, where the fuck are we?
Yeah, I don't have the voice control. I can't take the noise from the thing, and I don't want it listening to me, so I don't have voice activation on.
People do use it, and it does.
Right, but for me, because this is my idea, I want it to be functional for people also like me who in part don't want to be bothered with the thing and don't want it telling me, even if it's just in the visuals, wait, you took a wrong turn. It's like, I didn't take a wrong turn. I live here, buddy. I know better than you do what to do here. And trust me, at the point that I do get to a place where I'm not sure what to do, I'll be grateful for your help unless I've thrown you out the window before then because I'm so frustrated with you.
Right. No, I totally want it to work for you, but I also want it to work for the kinds of, like husbands of people like you. It would be cool if it worked for just like everybody. And you could set it, which mode do you want it in?
How many husbands of people like me do you think there are?
I'm going to have to sit down and diagram that sentence and figure out what the correct answer to that is. But I will say one other thing. Yeah. Getting lost has changed radically in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Right? It used to be you were a lot more likely to get lost, but when you got lost, you weren't that lost, right? With these map programs.
So I know where you're going, but I will say that I remember, when would we have even been doing this? I remember driving in New York City and getting stuck in New Jersey.
Right.
And this is early. This is in the 90s or something. I'm like, no idea how to fix this. Like we were trying to, I don't even know where we were going. I know we had started in Manhattan. We had not intended to go to New Jersey.
I remember this. And we got so lost we actually contemplated moving to New Jersey just to
like
solve the problem.
Right. If you lived here, you'd be home by now. Yes, we're home.
Fine. Deal.
Yes.
Done.
Great.
Sold. Yeah.
So that sort of thing did happen.
Well, no,
and we also got lost in Madagascar once. Do you remember this?
Where I've been lost in Madagascar a couple times.
We had failed to understand that in most of the southern hemisphere, your northern hemisphere compasses don't work, and so we were trying to navigate at night with our compass, and
we got all tangled.
Yeah. Anyway,
tangled up.
Story for another time.
But anyway, the thing is, though, the feature that I want on the damn thing, and maybe it exists in there, but it's not obvious where it is the ability to check. Right, you plug in something. And then you've clicked away and it says, aha, I'll take you there, right? And then you don't know where you're going. You don't know if you've got it right. And
this only happens to you. This has never happened to me.
How could it not have happened to you?
Well,
you've never had your map program settle on the wrong instance of a something that there's more than one, and you find
I do check.
But how do you check without turning it off? It doesn't say where it's going.
Well, it's on a map. Our son says, "I'm right. It only happens." Well, let's actually ask the audience as well.
If I've never been there,
well, okay. So for me, because I actually it's hard. Like we all use the app now. We all are less connected to and this is the point I think you were ultimately making, is like getting lost is different now, because even if we are trying to navigate by instinct with our eyes, not using the app. Okay, I still try to use paper maps sometimes, although honestly I can't remember the last time I pulled one out. We just know our landscapes less well than we used to. This is something I've told our boys too. I don't ever get in the car going someplace I've never been until I've looked, not in the car. Yes, it's often on my screen. It's like, okay, what part of town is this in? In the Pacific Northwest, the cities are broken up into quadrants. So all the addresses tell you, is it southwest, southeast, northwest, northeast that you're going to, or bizarrely, Portland has a fifth, the north. I don't know why. So even just that, like, okay, I'm going to the southeast. I think I'll probably end up on one of these two bridges. And then I look, I'm like, oh, wait, why is it? That doesn't seem right. So like, I do the little fact check in advance.
Right. You do the fact check in advance. And my point is, if you're late to something, you've never been there, and you plug in an address and you click yes, and you can find yourself across town or all the way across the continent if you're not paying attention, right?
I will be curious to know if Bret is in fact the only person this happens to, or if there are a whole lot of other husbands of people like me to whom it happens.
You are going to be frightened when you find out how many people have gotten really lost as a result of the fact that the navigator very effectively took them someplace that they had no intention of going.
And they also live here now?
They live somewhere because it was just simpler. Yeah.
If they lived there, they'd be home by then. Yeah.
No.
This is fun. Do you have any thoughts around the benefits or drawbacks of forms of exercise? Our ancestors clearly didn't have weight plates or ellipticals. Yeah. Oh man, we should do a whole episode on that actually at some point. Personally, I have almost never been able to stand being in a gym. And that's partially because of my strong, clear, and I've never tried to hide it, bias towards being outside. But also because the kinds of things that you are exposed to outside, be it walking, running, biking, paddleboarding, kayaking, whatever it is, introduce variation into what you're doing that actually, yes, keeps you more interested, but so you're more likely to keep doing it. At least people like me are. But also, it's more likely to actually train your body for the kinds of things that you will run into. So if you're just exercising in order for your body not to fall apart, and you don't imagine ever needing to use it for anything outside of basically getting between home and gym, then whatever you're doing at the gym might be sufficient. But even just the experience of oh, I'm fit. I'm okay. I'm working out. I'm doing this, ellipticals, weight plates, whatever it is, reliably. And oh, I have to, reach the thing on the top shelf. I'm just going to stand on my tippy toes and reach for it. Like, oh God, that wasn't the way that I was supposed to be moving, right? Like that sort of thing, which we've all heard stories like that. Whether or not you've experienced it or not, you know the kind of thing I'm talking about is going to be less likely to happen if you're using your body regularly in all sorts of ways on every plane of movement, with burst speed, with low and slow, with all of the possible things that you might experience, such that the street sign changed as you were halfway across a long intersection. Can you run to make it? You should be able to at almost every age. This happened to me yesterday. I remember a couple years before the boat accident just knocked me off. I was not in great shape for maybe the first time in my life. And this happened to me, and I just ran to cross the street. I was, mid 40s or something at that point. It's like, that didn't feel good. Why am I stiff and weird all over? Like, gotta fix that.
Yeah.
Gotta be able to run half a block. I'd rather be able to run a lot more than that. But to the degree that you're, the narrowly constrained types of exercises will provide a narrowly constrained type of fitness.
But I think you're drawing it too sharply. Okay. I even think the difference between running in the city and trail running, for example, it's a huge difference, right?
Sure.
And there's something about the regularity. The more regularity, in some sense, the worse it is. Yeah. And also the more, I'm very much a fan of bicycling, and I do a lot of it even in the winter. But the point is, it's very good lower body exercise. It's not such great upper body exercise. Now, mountain biking, especially single-speed mountain biking, which I used to do, was actually pretty good upper body. But regular road biking is not. And
you actually have to muscle
your
way up the hill.
There's a lot of English. You're pulling the front of the bike, and it works better. But anyway, so having a kind of exercise, it's good for cardio. It's good for your lower body, not so great for your upper body. So it'd be great to match it with something like kayaking that's more upper body or whatever. But anyway, the lack of regularity is your friend in more ways than one. One, you build a model of something rather than you're running on a perfectly flat concrete surface. Two, it forces you to exceed limits, right? And so the point is, if you think about the old version of muscle building involved a lot of repetition, but the point is the repetition would work if you were a simple physical system. It does not work if you're an informational system trying to figure out how strong to be.
It's an engineer's approach.
Yeah, you keep lifting the same weight, and the point is you're not telling the body, actually, you need to be stronger than this. The way to do that is actually to just barely not be able to lift something.
Right. Find your limit and try to go beyond it on the regular. And, and also, not be at that limit all the time, but change it up. Yeah.
I will also say the fact of anything that you do that forces you to confront the variation in weather, including temperature, but rainfall and all of that, has a psychological benefit that nothing else matches. And I must say, any day that I don't spend significant time forced to confront the weather, and I don't always want to do it, but just the simple fact of this was one of those days, and then it's much better today, has a time doesn't all blend together anymore.
No, it's amazing. And you've been biking to school with Toby most mornings, and it's very December-y out there at this point. But boy, you guys do it, and it's amazing.
Well, actually, this is something to return to another day. But I've been thinking about it's dressing for biking in the Pacific Northwest in the winter, and this is true in Michigan also, is very, very difficult because basically you're not built for this. You are built to regulate your temperature with your skin and your capillaries, and if you put something over that, either you're shedding heat into your jacket, and then the point is you get really hot and then you get really clammy, right? Or you aren't capturing enough heat, and so you get really cold, and so you're shooting for this very narrow range, and it requires
You're going at speed, so you're
Right.
you're adapted to regulate your heat with your skin at human speeds, not at bicycle speeds, where the boundary layers are blowing away your either your insulative layer, if you've got the stuff on, or you're even colder than you are if you're exposing your skin to the
Right.
elements.
So there are a bunch of things like in December, if you feel comfortable when you've left the house, you're going to be hot right away, right? You need to be uncomfortable for a while in order to reach comfortable. But the trick is, how do you build up the right level of boundary layer, which varies with the temperature of the day
And the nature of the precipitation.
Right, exactly. Right, because you're dealing with two different substances that have two different specific heats. You're dealing with air rushing over you versus water falling on you and then dripping away.
Yeah. I think the one thing we can agree on is that cotton is your enemy in this situation.
Yeah, cotton sucks.
Yeah. I mean, I love it normally. I'm not wearing any at the moment. But yeah, for exercise, it just, it gets wet and stays wet.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we could go on and on about that one. We only have 15 more minutes. Okay. Can you explain your thoughts on flu vaccines, specifically the theory that repeated vaccination in young children may lead to less protection when they are older? I have not heard that, actually. I've not heard that.
I am ever more convinced that we are taking this most precious of resources, which is the ability to vaccinate against pathogens, and we are treating it frivolously and wasting it. And I am suspicious of the flu vaccine. Now, I am also concerned that we are going to hit a very serious flu epidemic.
Yeah.
And I'm also, the last flu I had, which was, 5 or 6 years ago, was terrible. It really knocked me on my ass. But so it's not that I take flu lightly, but the question is, what's the net impact, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not compelled that, because vaccine has a positive connotation with respect to health, that more is better, that the vaccines are formulated in the correct way. And
we know with regard to the flu vaccine that it's a probabilistic estimate of, which of the ones that were circulating like half a year ago in the Southern Hemisphere are likely to be the ones that are dominant now here. And, did we guess right? Is this in fact the right vaccine for the moment? Like, even, aside from all of that, like, it's the efficacy varies by year precisely because which versions of which viruses are circulating varies.
Well, I also, now that I've watched the manufacturers treat COVID the way they have and lie to us about what they know, I now don't know what to think about the fact that, there's a whole lot of variation every year. Are there ever years in which they make things worse? Right? Is there ADE with respect to flu? I don't know. But
yeah, I certainly, we can't do this at the anecdotal level, but I certainly wondered this anecdotally when I had a flu vaccine in late 2019 and in February 2020 had and gave to Zach, and you and Toby seem to have not gotten it, or maybe you did and didn't show it, either COVID or the most unusual and really heinous flu that I've had.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd had a flu vaccine in a few years, and
yeah,
I don't know.
I also am now pretty sure they have not given us, and this is true for so many consumer items, but in this case, this is your health we're talking about. They don't give us enough information to behave rationally, right?
Right.
Okay, you've got an adjuvant in this vaccine. Should you be really careful what you eat and for how long, right? Should you be extra careful?
Say another 2 words about that, because that's important. The idea that, for instance, your wheat sensitivity you may also have some other sensitivities, because whatever it is in the wheat or in you that prompted an allergy to happen may have basically created sensitivities to whatever else was in your gut at the same time.
Right, exactly.
And so an adjuvant may create sensitivity that then may co-create sensitivity for anything else that is in your system at the same time.
Right. So basically, it's an irritant that awakens the immune system to get a stronger response. And there are reasons to do that, because there are trade-offs in these things. A live virus, an attenuated virus vaccine tends to produce a very good immunological response, but because it's a live virus, it runs the risk of mutating and becoming pathogenic. But if you take a killed virus, for example, it doesn't produce a very strong response because the body doesn't really understand itself to be infected because it isn't.
Right.
And so they add these adjuvants to awaken the immune system, but they don't say, hey, by the way, for the next 2 weeks, you might want to avoid these things, which are very likely to get picked up by the immune system, and it could cause you to have a lifelong sensitivity to peanuts. Now, I don't know that peanuts is or isn't, but I do know that that's a story. I want to know more about what they know about what the adjuvants can do, rather than just have the pretense that, hey, because it comes in a syringe, it's good for you.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, specifically the idea that actually for the whatever it is, 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, post injection, you are potentially more at risk, not just maybe from the disease, in the case of the COVID vaccines at least, but more at risk of creating for yourself a lifelong immune problem unless you take great care, is something I've never heard from any health professional.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, you don't need to know very much about things like antibodies to see that there is a question that has to be answered, right? Because if you've got flu viruses that are closely related to each other. And if you've had the flu before, that means you've got antibodies to things in that neighborhood, right? At the point that you've been injected with something, an antigen that is going to trigger, it is going to occupy a certain amount of the antibodies that you have to things in the neighborhood, right? Now, that could leave them detained while you encounter actual flu. So it might be that the answer is, hey, don't wait until flu is here, right? Get it before flu is here, and be careful of these influences for whatever the period is. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, but somebody should tell us, right? And there's just not enough info. They treat us like children and pretend it's just simply an unalloyed good. Yeah,
no, that's right. Okay, we're gonna not get to a lot of questions today. Let's try to run through quickly.
Okay.
Hello. I don't want to rush through this one, but hello. I'm a Canadian-Afghan war vet. I was just wondering if you would expand on PTSD from the evolutionary lens. What might modern humans do to help prevent or facilitate it? Facilitate, presumably meaning like treat, get through it.
I got a
Go for it.
Quick riff.
Yeah.
Thing is, you're a human being, and just like a human population, you are built to be able to deal with radical change, right? What we do not seem to be well equipped to do is do radical change twice, right? In other words, imagine that you had a radical change in your life where you went from being a something to a something else. You changed careers or something like this, or you were a carpenter and suddenly you're a soldier, right? You're a soldier. There are people dying around you. You can adapt to that, right? What you have a hard time adapting to is going back to a life where you don't have to worry that there's a sniper in the supermarket, right? And so the point is that this is why it's post-traumatic stress, right? Yeah. It's not something you are built to unlearn, right? You matured into soldier, and you can't.
Successful soldiers get through the actual trauma intact, usually.
Yeah, I mean,
or they don't.
Or they don't. But the point is, you're not built to be able to forget what you learned about death at war, for example.
Right.
And so. There is a lot. You probably want to avail yourself of some kind of a hack that will allow you to revise this. So things, probably supervision is highly recommended, but people do find that entheogens are good at reprogramming the mind, in part because they can create very intense,
like psilocybin mushrooms or ayahuasca,
right?
For instance.
So very intense, open-minded experiences that if you guide yourself into confronting the issues that you're having trouble getting past will allow you to write some new code.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And this too, I think we could do a whole lot on. I would also recommend just again, this Tribe by Sebastian Junger on homecoming and belonging, and also his book War, which I think I've read everything he's written, all of the books he's written at this point, and they're all great, but Tribe and War will speak to you, I think, specifically. as well. Do you think it is likely that electromagnetic radiation of wireless tech has a negative impact on organisms? Would this be hard to detect?
It's tough. Non-ionizing radiation is sure to be much safer. It's possible that up to some threshold of energy, it's safe. In fact, it's likely that there's a threshold, but where that threshold goes is a little tough. There have been a lot of people who've looked into it. And I would say I do think we need to be aware that the higher the energy and the closer our proximity to the sources, the greater the danger. And it is quite possible that the perverse incentives in our system will prevent people from alerting us at the point that we have created hazards for ourselves.
Yes. We just did that one. Let's see. Have you read The Real Dr. Fauci by Robert Kennedy Jr.? Shocking what he lays out. We've both begun to read it.
Yeah,
we have. It's long and dense,
really
and
long,
important, and we recommend it.
Yes, highly.
Yes. What the fuck is up with the 55-year lag the FDA claims it needs to process the FOIA request on the Pfizer vaccine licensing data?
That is there
really
because it is important that the people committing these crimes either have died or become so powerful that they are beyond prosecution by the time we know what has happened. So
yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might you have Bob Trivers on at some point? I bet we'd all enjoy hearing a conversation with someone who helped you build your evolutionary toolkit.
Yeah, I would love to have Bob on. There's lots of stuff I would love to run by him, actually.
Yeah. He actually, we've just been in touch with him again. He's reading our book, and he sent us kudos, which felt really, really great.
Yeah, sure did.
Yeah. I do not know the answer to this question, but you might. Hi, I finally found a doctor that would order a nucleocapsid antibodies test. I had COVID 7 months ago. The antibody level has to be at least 17.8 IgG, and I have 91.3. However, I was told not to read too much into that number for my immunity status. Any idea what levels of antibodies are a risk for infection?
Wait. This person had COVID.
Yeah.
They recovered. They've had an antibody test.
And they are at 5 times the level that is considered.
Yeah. This is so frustrating. First of all, antibodies are not where the primary immunity to this virus is coming from. It's a proxy, right? What it's telling you is how well your immune system reacted to this thing, but you actually expect the antibody level to drop precipitously afterwards, right? It goes into a memory cell phase. And the fact is we have excellent evidence that natural immunity is extremely durable. Now, you could get enough evolution that you would face some new variant that would have less protection. But so far as we know, the protection you get seems to be lifelong. Now, obviously, nobody's had it for very long. But the point is, immunities are often lifelong unless there's something about the pathogen that makes that impossible, where the pathogen is so rapidly evolving that can't be the case. But that does not appear to be the case here. So what I would say is, don't read too much into that test. What you should read something into is the spectacular level of immunity that people who've actually had COVID appear to walk away with, right? That's the key thing. And, there's debate about how many breakthrough cases there are for people's natural immunity. But in fact, I learned from Dr. McCullough, and you should check out my podcast with Dr. McCullough. Yeah. That, in fact, it may be that there are vanishingly few breakthrough cases.
I think he claims 0.
Well, he claims 0. Yeah. My question is, does this apply to immunocompromised people? I don't know. Yeah. But for people who have a healthy immune system, the number may actually be 0 because, of course, there are false positives to the test. So what you want to establish is that what you've got is something above the baseline of false positives. Yes. And we do not have that evidence. So I would say, you would be safe to assume you have natural immunity, which doesn't mean be reckless, but it does mean you don't need to go face some substantial risk in order to gain more immunity, which wouldn't work anyway.
Okay. I wanted to get through 4 more questions in 3 minutes, but now we have 30 seconds. So can we do it?
Yes.
Okay. Does your culture versus consciousness hypothesis make any testable predictions? Thanks for your work. Lots of love.
Yeah, it makes lots of testable predictions, including, you could get right down to the mechanistic level. It makes predictions about what parts of the brain will light up under different kinds of circumstances on an fMRI machine. You could try to beat the limit of only being able to put a person in an FRI machine by, pooling people and having them scanned in at the same moment, for example. So yes, it makes lots and lots of predictions. Some of them only technically testable, many of them quite practical.
Remember when we were told the vaccines were 98% effective? Was that a flat out lie, or were the trials designed to affect no other outcome? I don't know.
There's so much in the trials that appears to be, I think the point is it's not even clear what the number itself means if it is 100% true, right?
Depends on what the meaning of effective is.
Right. So anyway, there's lots of shenanigans, including surrounding that number. And frankly, I think the thing people really need to think about is that this is actually standard operating procedure for pharma.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no,
that's
exactly.
not unique to COVID at all.
Yeah. It's standard operating procedure for pharma as laid out in Bad Pharma, How Drug Companies Mislead Doctors and Harm Patients, in Ben Goldacre's book. Second to last question. I can't work or travel without a vaccine now in Canada. When I provide sources for my arguments, they dismiss it. How do I get this information past the social wall that people have put up? They all seem brainwashed. This is a big question, obviously.
Yeah, and it's not just Canada.
Right. But I mean, Canada is ahead of the U.S. in terms of restrictions, behind Australia and New Zealand, it seems, at least parts of Australia and New Zealand.
And Germany, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, this is, in part, I think it's not down to you, right? I think we all, vaccinated and not, need to stand up against an absolutely absurd set of mandates that are not science-based. And I don't think there's any advice you can give an individual. You obviously know what they're threatening you with, and their threat is obviously credible. So good luck to you. I wish that this is the problem, is you don't have any protection as an individual from this. The tyranny is quite powerful.
Final question. Why are human beings attracted to shiny objects, such as gold or jewels?
Well, it's an interesting question. So first of all, it'd be interesting to know whether or not we are attracted to shininess, which I think there's an argument that we are, right? Yeah. We also like the way light shines off the water.
That's exactly the example I was going to give. And sunrise and sunset is a shiny moment.
Yep. And we are captivated by the glistening of snow.
Mm-hmm. And the shininess on organisms, on
the
iridescence on beetles, on butterfly wings, on some bird feathers, hummingbirds. They're okay.
So I think there are a couple answers to your question. One, what shininess is often a hint to something special, right? It is a molecular specialness. Mm. The iridescence on bird feathers and butterfly wings is a very precise shelf-like structure. There's no pigment there. It's actually...
What were the two examples you gave?
Butterfly wings and bird feathers, the iridescence.
I think bird feather, it happens both ways on bird feathers.
Oh,
it's structural. It's sometimes structural.
No, the iridescence is always structural. There is, of course...
The iridescence is always structural.
Yeah, that's why it's iridescent looking.
Even... Not in either of those two examples, but on like a beetle carapace?
I don't know, but I would guess so, because okay. I think the point is the iridescence is the result of the fact that as you move, you're changing what angle.
It's an interference pattern.
Yeah, it's an interference pattern. And,
yeah.
But in any case, the point is it is an indicator of something special. This is why the birds are displaying this. Basically, male birds are telling female birds, I'm
just that precise.
Yeah, or I'm just that clean, or I'm just that well fed that I can make this molecularly precise little shelf all over my feathers or whatever. Mm-hmm. But the point is,
Which for some reason doesn't work as a pickup line. It's just too technical.
How do you know?
I can imagine.
Oh.
I can put myself in the brain of a female bird.
I see. All right.
Yeah.
I guess I also just said it, and you must not have felt anything. So
Really didn't.
yeah. All right.
But then you're also not iridescent, so you appear to be lying.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
I think you won that round. But okay, so the point is, all of the things that, you know, a gem that has sheared and has left a face smooth enough for it to cause that shininess is worth investigating. It might be a rare gem, or it might just indicate a deposit in the rocks or something, but it's a piece of information. And so anyway, I would just argue that shininess is a hallmark of something. We, of course, have extra, because we've learned to polish things, because we've learned to make glass very smooth and then put silver. There's sort of an added, we can get utility out of these things. But
it also, I mean, one of the simplest answers here also is that we've made shininess ubiquitous and cheap in the marketplace. Excuse me. But shiny used to be an indicator of value and also fairly rare.
Rarity,
and so a gift of shiny was an indicator of I care enough, because this shiny thing isn't something that I just picked up on my way to you. I couldn't have. It's fairly rare. Here. This is the evidence that I was thinking of.
Yes, I must love you because I'm giving you this shiny thing, which you know that I want because I'm a human and therefore I like shiny things.
It's shiny. I'm giving it to you.
Right.
Love me.
Exactly. And there you have it.
There it is. Yep.
Yep.
All right. I think we've arrived. This has been a little fast-paced and scattered today, guys, but we'll be back next week at the normal time, I believe, at 12:30. And go to Darvel's to pick up Darvel's bookstore online to to order a signed copy of our book. Go onto our Patreons. Right now, the question asking period is open at mine. Lots of other things to talk about. Oh, gift giving on my Substack this week on Natural Selections. And until we see you next, be good to the ones you love, eat good food, and get outside.
Be well, everyone.